Let me begin by asking you this question. What is the difference between a dog and a German Shepherd? So, if you see a German Shepherd, what is that? Is it a German Shepherd or is it a dog? Well, you say, well, it's both. That's obvious. Now, you see another dog and you ask yourself, is that a German Shepherd? Well, not necessarily. So, the reason we say that is to understand when we talk about Asperger syndrome and autism is that Asperger syndrome is a breed, if you will, of autism. Probably not a good term to use except for the use of analogy to understand that everyone with Asperger syndrome is autistic, but not everyone who is autistic is an Aspie, a person with Asperger syndrome. Well, how do you know the difference? How do you know who is an Aspie and who just has autism but is not an Aspie? Well, we got 5 things, and these are really kind of simple. Number 1 is people with Asperger syndrome tend to have average or higher intelligence. Their IQ is around 100, maybe a little bit lower, 100 and on up, but they're autistic. So that is one of the key differences between somebody who has autism whose intelligence is a little bit lower or maybe significant lower because they don't have the functionality of somebody who is, well, they're just brighter, they're smarter, and there's nothing. That's not to say somebody is better than somebody else, but it's just to acknowledge reality that we're different. So people with Asperger syndrome tend to have an edge on those who are autistic in that our intellectual capabilities are advanced. Number 2 is what we call self-help skills. So if you have autism, and you brush your hair, you brush your teeth, comb your hair, whatever. If you can take care of yourself, take a shower in the morning or whenever you take it, if you can drive a car, if you go about your daily life, put on your clothes, dress yourself, chances are you're not, or you are an Aspie, but you have autism. Whereas somebody who is not an Aspie, they just autistic, is they struggle with these things. Now, maybe they can do some of them, maybe they can do most of them, but they tend to need a little bit of help or a whole lot of help. They're kind of like Rain Man. Remember Raymond in the movie Rain Man? He was supposed to be autistic. And there he was, incapable of taking care of himself. So that is a good example of the difference. And I know somebody will say the character upon which that was based, that individual was not autistic. Thank you for informing us, but we already know that. That's not the point. The point is that Raymond, I forget his last name, in the movie Rain Man, he was portrayed as being somebody who was dependent for those basic life skills. Number 3 is speech delay. Now, people who are Aspies, they typically do not have delay in speech. In fact, they may even be early. They tend to have vocabularies that are advanced, where somebody who does not have Asperger syndrome, just the opposite, they could have delayed speech. So a person with Asperger syndrome, typically they have advanced vocabularies. A lot of times people will say their little kid with Asperger syndrome talks like an adult because they use a terminology and sentence structures that are familiar to or are typical to people who are full grown. So that's an indicator that this kid may have Asperger syndrome. And as they grow older in life, their vocabulary tends to build. And so that sometimes can present a problem because when they have this advanced vocabulary, when we have this advanced vocabulary, what happens is people don't take it very well. They may know what the words mean that we use, but it's just not something that is in the vernacular. It's not something that people use every day, and so they see us as kind of aloof. But hey, it's the best word. It best describes whatever it is we're talking about. So we use those words, but other people don't understand it. They understand the words, but they don't understand why we're using those words because it just sounds out of place. Well, how do you define autism? You define it this way. Keep that thought in mind. But here's how you define autism. Autism is a development disorder that impairs an individual's ability to socialize and communicate. And so when we use these out of range words, again, not that other people don't understand them, it's just words they don't typically use every day. That is kind of a barrier, a social barrier that puts us on the outside. One of those many little things that just kind of pushes us away. So that will take us to verbal communication is, it's not just when we begin speaking, but throughout our life. What happens is we discover as people with Asperger syndrome that we don't communicate very well. One-on-one in groups, we're not very good at it. So we don't quite understand what other people are doing when they get together in groups. People never met before. Put a bunch of them in a room, maybe 100 people in a room, and they all start chattering, start talking. And those of us with Asperger syndrome stand back and watch, and how do they do that? So go back to your earliest days. Maybe you were in school, first grade, and the kids are on the playground. Maybe it's recess time and they're playing together, and you're standing at the sideline wondering, how do they know how to do that? Why isn't anybody playing with me? Why is it I'm all by myself? And that doesn't change because there's something missing in your brain, literally. We call that mind blindness. I talk about that a lot on this channel. And basically it means you don't have the capacity. It's like being physically blind. Part of your brain that occipital lobe or whatever you call it isn't functioning properly, so you can't see. You literally can't see. And that's that's analogous to what happens to mind blindness, is you just can't see. You can't understand how to communicate with other people, so you don't, because you can't. So you grow up being an adult and you're in a group of people, totally strangers, and they're all talking to each other. You don't know how they're doing it. Have you ever had this experience, and I talk about this now and again, where you're talking to other people? Maybe you're sitting around a table or whatever, and you're having a nice conversation, except you're not participating. And the guy to your right is talking to the guy to your left, and the guy to the left is talking to the guy to your right. And it's kind of like you're either invisible or you're just kind of in the way, and you feel like you're in the way. And you have this sensation that what you need to do is back up or just get up and go somewhere else so these people can talk together. That's mind blindness. We just don't know how to fit into the conversation. Now, what's interesting, I think, is other people sense this. And because they sense that we have a communication problem, they may try to talk to us initially, but they pick up on it very, very quickly. Maybe the tone of our voice, our inability to articulate, the fact that our brain is very confused, and so our speech reflects that confusion, and they think, this guy's just weird. I think I'll go talk to somebody else. And that's what they do. So we have what we call a problem with verbal communication, and that, however, is across the board. All people with autism have it, but it's something that's just kind of set aside with those of us who have Asperger syndrome, because other than that, there may be no other indicator that we have autism. So with a person who is not an autistic, who is not an Aspie, does not have Asperger syndrome, sometimes it's kind of obvious, really obvious, that this person, there's something not flowing correctly. There's something that appears to be disconnected. But with an Aspie, a lot of times we come across first impression just like everybody else. That's why it's often so hard to detect. And when those communication skills aren't there, it becomes an oddity in the minds of others. Number 5 is, as we kind of alluded to earlier, is we tend to develop a vocabulary that is maybe not more extensive, but usually more extensive than other people. And not only do we develop that vocabulary, but we tend to use it. And people find that terribly annoying. Why are you using that word? Because some people, they don't even know what it means. Often they do, but sometimes they don't. Why would you use a word if nobody knows what it means? Why would you talk to English-speaking people in Russian if they can't understand you? Well, there are words in English that I don't understand. I mean, there are so many English words, I don't think anybody knows all of them. So nobody talk about somebody who speaks fluent English. I don't know of anybody who is 100% fluent in English, because there's always some word out there that somebody doesn't know. But Aspies tend to know more of them than other people, and we tend to use them. And because of that vocabulary, what would you call it? Vocabulary, I don't want to call it dominance. It's actually kind of it's somewhere between dominance and a defect. I don't know where to put it. But people don't quite know what to do with us, so they stay away from us. They see us as aloof or trying to be smart. So that's one of the indicators. If you want to keep on talking, let's do it. All you got to do is click on one of those two rectangles that you see on the screen, and our conversation will continue. If not, well, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see y'all next time.